Hi, if you clicked on this video, I'm guessing you're currently a designer considering switching into management. I recently did this switch myself after being a product designer for several years, and now I've been working for the last year or so as a product design manager. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey into management and also share with you my observations and key differences between the two roles. So let's get into it. So maybe you're just about to start your first role as a design manager. Perhaps you're feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome, some self-doubt. After all, this is a really different job, and our role and responsibilities are about to completely change when we step into management. But don't worry, I'm here to help make you feel prepared and have some good expectations for what might come next. Let's zoom out a little bit and look at the design track. Now, a good tech company will have two tracks when it comes to design, which often forks off at around the senior level. So once you get to a senior IC designer, you may be faced with a decision to choose whether you want to continue on the IC track, move into more senior roles like staff or principal designer, or perhaps you're interested in switching to the management track, where you might then start by becoming a junior design manager. I do want to point out that it is not required to switch into the management track in order to keep growing, to keep leveling up, and even increasing your compensation. I know several successful designers who have spent their entire career in the IC track and have gone on to become really proficient designers, making a good amount of money. If you're unsure about the tracks available in your company or what they support when it comes to growth, see if you can have a conversation with your design manager, ask to see the roles and responsibilities or the rubric, whatever the sort of design levels, role and responsibilities framework is at your company, to see what the possibilities are and maybe have a bit of a discussion as to what the options are for you. You may be on the fence at the moment. Perhaps you're an IC, senior designer, and you're trying to decide, should I switch to management? So while I am going to show you later in this video some of the key differences I've experienced, I want to cut to the chase and tell you right now the biggest difference I've faced when it comes to the day-to-day of my role as a manager. And it may be no surprise to hear that the biggest difference I've faced is that you spend a lot less time actually designing. So no longer are you spending hours and hours and focus blocks in Figma creating designs. However, you are ultimately now responsible for your team's work, including the quality and the value of work that they design. So while you might spend less time on the ground in Figma, you're now spending a lot more time reviewing work, giving feedback. Your team now sees you as a stakeholder where they might need to get your approval even to get a design out the door. As a design manager, I'm always looking for opportunities to increase my team's efficiency. So how can we get things out the door faster? How can we get things in the hands of users quicker so we can get some valuable feedback and iterate and improve as quickly as we can? Actually, I think there's something that can help with this. Let's take a look. Working on a web or mobile app design project, this platform can help take your ideas to the next level and save you tons of time and money along the way. Meet Buzzy, an AI-powered platform revolutionizing app development. No code needed and no UX design experience needed either. Here's how. Kickstart your app development with Buzzy's AI. In just a few minutes, you can generate a full-stack working application with a few simple prompts. It's one of the most efficient ways to get a working prototype up and running and get it in the hands of real users so you can get valuable feedback. Turn your AI-generated app into a Figma file to make modifications, or take an existing Figma file and watch as it instantly updates the working application. Remove the lengthy tech bottlenecks from the equation by making design changes and app updates in just a few clicks. No code needed. Need to make some changes? Don't worry about starting from scratch. You can customize your design by using Buzzy's code widgets and integrations to ensure your app remains unique and efficient without sacrificing the quality of your design. What would take a team of developers months, you can achieve in just a few days with Buzzy. If you're ready to streamline your design process and create something amazing, it's never been a better time to start. With up to 75% off Buzzy's most popular monthly plans, you can get started today. Thanks to Buzzy for sponsoring this video. Let's start with a look into my journey. So I spent about 6 years as an IC product designer before I decided to make the switch into management. It was about in 2022 when I was in a senior designer position and considering the switch. I actually had an opportunity to move into a management role at the company I was at the time, but I also wanted to shop around a little bit, so I started interviewing. And because I was in a senior designer role at the time, I decided I would interview for both senior designer positions and management positions at other companies and kind of see what I could get, compare, see what opportunities there are for me out there in management. I ended up getting an offer from Gusto, which is the company I am at now, to join their team as a design manager. And I weighed that up against the internal opportunity I had to move into management and ultimately decided that Gusto was the better fit and choice for me at the time. And so that's where I've been ever since, working as a design manager. Now, what's unique about my role at Gusto is that I'm in a player coach role. So while I'm a design manager, I'm also still doing design IC work. So I'm kind of wearing two hats at the moment. On a given week, that means that I might spend quite a bit of time in some leadership meetings and then have some focus blocks to get some actual design work done. Although I find the more time I spend in the role, the more time I'm moving into that more like lead manager kind of role where I'm not so focused on the designs in Figma as time goes on, but I am juggling a little bit managing a team as well as doing some smaller scale projects just to help get things out the door. I would say the majority of my time in my role is definitely spent on the bigger picture stuff. So talking about road mapping, strategic planning, visioning, staffing, or scoping conversations. Now let's talk a little bit about interviewing for a manager position. For the most part, I found that the interview process was very similar to interviewing for an IC role. I did a portfolio review, I had a few one-on-ones with design managers, product managers at the company. I'd say the only difference was that I had an additional interview which was focused on sort of leadership management attributes and your kind of style when it comes to leadership. So it was just an additional, I think maybe like 30 or 45-minute one-on-one. I'll admit that I was pretty nervous about interviewing for management because I had no experience being a manager. And after talking to some friends in the industry, I'd heard that it was easier to move internally into a management position rather than, say, leave your IC role and interview for a manager role, because to be honest, I had no management experience on my resume. So I had a bit of self-doubt and was not having high hopes. I thought if this actually works out, I'm probably going to be pretty lucky, because why would someone hire me for a manager position with no management experience when I'm sure there are many other qualified people out there? But I thought, I've got nothing to lose, I'm gonna try it anyway. And so here's a few things that I did in order to position myself as best as I could for that role. So firstly, I focused on any existing leadership qualities that I feel like I had and could bring to the table. I had spent the past year or so trying to upskill and prepare myself for management because it's something I had decided about a year prior that it was the path I wanted to take. So some things that I ended up talking about was how I do a lot of mentoring, both in and outside of work. I had also mentored or coached an intern during my time in one of my roles, so I talked a lot about that as well. Leading design team rituals and proposing new initiatives for the design team. Also some self-initiation into courses and trainings. I talked about how I went on the Within retreat, I attended conferences, I did some online courses. I was also part of a Coho design fellowship program as well, and ultimately tried to kind of talk about all of my self-initiated learning into mentoring, coaching, and leadership. I also proactively talked about any related experience and how I demonstrated those qualities in my day-to-day work. For example, my experience navigating cross-functionally, managing up, resolving conflict, like any of those kind of sticky skills or qualities you need in a manager position. I made sure to really talk about those in detail during the interview process to give concrete examples of what I did in those situations. If you're curious, I have a whole video on my portfolio when I applied for a manager role, so you can go and check that video out over here if you want to see a walkthrough of my portfolio presentation at the time. So what are the key differences? Well, we already talked about how we're spending less time pixel pushing in Figma and more time as a sort of reviewer or stakeholder of other designers' work. Another big key difference for me has been spending a lot more time and headspace in those higher level cross-functional strategic conversations and building upon my relationship with my cross-functional partners. So I'm spending so much more time in things like road mapping conversations, vision, strategy, staff scoping, resource planning, looking further out, like how does this all fit into our bigger vision? How are we going to resource and prioritize and staff all of these initiatives? There's a lot of thinking that goes into that. So you might not see it. It's happening behind the scenes, perhaps, if you're just an IC designer, but there's so much conversation and thought that goes into all of that planning. And so I spend quite a bit of time each week, to be honest, having those kinds of conversations. People management is another one, so something you don't need to worry about if you're just an IC designer, but as a manager, you might now have reports. In fact, you probably do. And so there is a big aspect of people management when it comes to being a manager. So I do spend a fair bit of my time mentoring, coaching, having one-on-ones with my reports, having performance-related conversations or career growth-related conversations, right? I'm sure as an IC designer, you probably wish you were having more career and growth-related conversations with your manager. I'm really aware of that as someone in that management position, that I have a lot of influence in that area for my reports. So I try to be as proactive as possible about making sure we have time to have those conversations and being aligned about what their goals and growth aspirations are, so I can help them work towards that. I also spend a lot of my time unblocking other people. So, you're kind of almost like the telephone line between people sometimes. So helping people get unblocked, helping them get the resources that they need or the staff that they need, and helping make sure that everything keeps running along smoothly. I also sometimes feel like I'm a bit of a umbrella, like shielding my team from all of the stuff that goes on from like the manager plus level, right? There's a lot of stuff happening up there. And so also part of my role is to kind of filter that and sort of shield my team when needed, but also pass on or provide information when needed as well. So that can also be challenging, but luckily I have a lot of support from other managers in that area too. Another area I feel like I spend more time on is design team culture, right? So now I'm in a position where I can have a lot more influence than before on things like design team rituals, what our culture is. Not only can I sort of make proposals in this area more successfully, but I can also bring them to life. So actually take on that responsibility of introducing a new workflow or process or tool even, right? Something we did recently was a bit of an overhaul of our leveling framework. So I was able to give feedback on that and see an early preview. And we had some conversations and brainstorming sessions around what do we want our roles and responsibilities framework to look like. So as a manager, you're in kind of more of those higher level conversations, which you're not as privy to as an IC. I have loved being a manager and I really enjoy the different challenges it brings me, but it is a very different role. Your day-to-day does look very different, and most noticeably, your responsibilities are very different. So even when it comes to your own sort of performance management, the expectations required for you to do in order to be a valuable member of the team are suddenly very different. Your worth and value is no longer about just your work. It's no longer about the designs you make in Figma, but it's now about your ability to have impact on your team, to help navigate conflict, to help people on your team grow and level up. And that can be really challenging too, but I personally really like the challenge. If you have any other questions about design management that I haven't answered in this video, pop them down below in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you. Have a great day, friends. See you next time.